Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Jen Wohlner, and I work for Livepeer. Livepeer is a very small company where we provide distributed, reliable live transcoding at a fraction of the cost. And we're based out of New York, but the team is distributed globally. And yeah, today I'm going to talk about SRE and product management and where those two fields intersect, and how you can apply that to your own workflow, whether or not you have someone with the title product manager on your team. Okay. So I'm based in St. Louis in the United States, and I thought I'd start with some non-technical facts about me just to get us warmed up. So my wife and I have 2 dogs named Mrs. Peanut Butter and Green Bean. My favorite color is purple, and I spend a lot of time giving back to the LGBT community via the Point Foundation, which is the US's largest LGBT scholarship fund. And I'm really good at running, cooking feasts, and drawing. Okay, so now we can start the talk. So sometimes SREs must do product management. And I know this isn't always thought of, but then you guys just saw the talk right before this, so maybe this isn't so much of a, oh my God, what's happening? But still, yes, you do product management. So I want to, before I get into examples on it, I want to talk about the differences between product and program management, because you might have titles like technical program manager in your organization. I've had all sorts of titles with product and program in them. And the internet and different people are going to tell you many different things. But for this presentation, I want to highlight a couple key differences. Both product and program managers are leaders who impact business goals. But product prioritizes ideation versus implementation on the program side. Product sits a little bit closer to the users, and they're focused on growing the product, whereas program is a little bit more embedded with engineers and is focused on like the health of the tech stack. I sum it up by saying product answers what and why, and program answers when and how. In all my roles, whether I've had the product manager title or the technical program manager title, I've done a bit of both. And I'm sure when you guys look at this, you guys as SREs, as managers, have done a lot of these things as well. Okay, so when do SREs do product management? All the gosh darn time. So basically, anytime you are making something that someone else or a forgetful future you is going to have to use, anything that will impact a workflow, most useful experiments, all of these have elements of product management in them. For example, you could be talking about rolling out a new deployment process for the rest of your team or the rest of your organization. Anytime you create a dashboard, like a metrics dashboard, that has to be legible. It's always legible when everything's going well. All the graphs look real pretty, but you need to understand, like, what do blips in your charts mean? And then when you're negotiating SLAs, like John spoke about before in the previous talk, you need to be empathizing with those other users. So I'm going to go over some best practices I've landed on over the years. I have summed it up in like 5 steps. There will be time for questions, so be thinking of them. But even though I told you guys some non-technical facts, I'm basically a stranger. Why should you listen to me? Listen to me. I've got it wrong before when leading software infrastructure and platform engineering at my previous company. At BuzzFeed, actually, we perfectly engineered a new continuous delivery pipeline. It was amazing, and it completely broke the workflow of the entire design team and the QA team. They were used to having like just 6 environments always ready, and they could use them how they wanted, and that changed. And the reason we messed up was because we only thought of engineers, and we made a lot of assumptions because we had the title engineer in our own job title. So then I learned a lot from actually just a straight up product designer who taught me and the other platform engineers and SREs I worked with about user experience and how to ask questions that aren't leading. And then I iterated on that process at both LinkedIn and Fastly. And now I work at Livepeer as a product manager working on video and CDN infrastructure, where I'm continuing to iterate on this process. So product management is about meeting needs, and it's about empathy. So before I get into like really tactically how you can apply product management best practices to your own work, I want to like let you in on a small secret and fun fact. It doesn't matter who does product work, what your title is, how senior you are, if you're a manager or an individual contributor. Just as long as it gets done, as long as someone's doing it, it's great. Even me, I have the title product manager, but I'm not like, I'm not territorial about it. I know others on my team have product management skills. We all know when we have a bad user experience in like a mobile app and then we just stop using it. Everyone has that insight to some extent. And especially when your team is making big bets or planning out projects, like doing that work that isn't just responsive. Having a process to think through what you will be delivering, what product and impact you will be delivering, that's gonna help you a lot. Okay, so we're gonna let our inner product manager shine. We're gonna go over 5 steps to understand the users of your tools, products, and processes. How do you decide what stuff will make your lives and users' lives better? How do you stay on track and build the most impactful products? Okay, 1, know your users and talk to them. So do not assume you know how your coworkers are doing their job or that they use the same workflow as you or are using your products and tools as you designed it or are even using your products and tools. They might have some weird workaround you don't know about. Also, it's not just engineers who push code and impact the reliability of your stack. Designers, data scientists, and product people, we also edit code and make production changes. All right, so this is the second part, talk to your users. Do user interviews. Sometimes a survey is perfect, but I highly recommend you take a higher touch approach in addition to or in lieu of a survey. Keep it short, like 30 minutes is usually good, and come prepared with your questions, like already written out, you're ready to take notes. We'll go over how to write those questions in the second step. And then make sure you have diversity among your interview subjects, not just like gender and race, but also like job title and seniority, and whether they're managers or individual contributors. Do interns and super senior individual contributors use your product or process? It might take a bit to figure out who your users are, but you should be interviewing a diverse sample to find that out. Feel free to bring a teammate. It's always helpful. It makes it a little less scary, but just bring one person. You don't want to outnumber or overwhelm your interview subjects. And then when you're done, maybe you're on a team of 6 and 1 or 2 of you went to interview, compile your findings and share them. Like your teammates are interested in what you learned. And this can be a really cool way to do team bonding. You can give a presentation, give them the raw data. Depending upon what you were doing for user interviews, you might have like a little video watching party, if you recorded it. And quotes are like always just like fun and heartwarming. Okay, 2, ask non-leading questions. So don't assume that your user actually uses your tool or that they use it as you intended. Don't assume that they like your product. And again, come prepared to the user interview with these questions written out. It'll give you a nice script to make sure you hit all the points you're curious about. So here's some examples. The first one is about Chef. So a leading question is like, do you have problems with Chef? That points someone in like a pretty negative direction. It's assuming that they're using Chef. Instead, you could keep it like really open-ended. Like, have you created a Chef cookbook while working here? They might just say like, no. And then you can be like, why not? Or what have you been using instead? Or they'll say yes, and then you can say, tell me when and walk me through how. So this is another example of a product, a spreadsheet documenting a major compliance effort. So yeah, just a spreadsheet, but people have to use that spreadsheet when you're not sitting right next to them. So that's why it's a product. And then deploying. These are, again, processes that are happening all the time, and you're not sitting next to the people doing it. You want to make sure they have a good experience. So instead of asking, why does your team do so few deploys and why are they always huge? It's pretty confrontational. It's not very nice. They're not going to want to open up. They're going to get, a little defensive. I would. Instead, ask them to show you what the steps are from code submitted to code successfully running in production for the application they're working on. Have them just write it out on a whiteboard. Have them walk you through their next deploy when it happens. You will learn a lot more by keeping your questions open-ended like this, by asking non-leading questions. Non-leading questions. Okay, prototyping sprints. This one's fun. So now you're ready to build. This is sort of like a hack week. It can include people not directly on the team. It may include a stakeholder, for instance, like if you're prototyping a monitoring dashboard feature, maybe invite the application engineer who could also be using the dashboard one day, and a product designer who can work on the user experience, the UX. Or maybe you're doing a build versus buy decision for an API gateway or something like that. And via some research, you're pretty sure the answer is buy. But instead of just doing that, you could confirm it quickly in a week with a prototyping sprint. You can set a modest goal that will answer for you within the week whether or not you should invest in this third party instead of building it yourself. And there's some really great benefits on it. You get the team bonding, which is always nice, like order pizza and get a small budget for it. And it also, because you only have a week, you have to narrow in on your scope and who your core users are. Not everyone necessarily needs to be onboarded all at once. There are people who need whatever you're testing out, whatever you're making more urgently. All right, and add user-centric goals to roadmaps. So there's a lot in there. There's user-centric goals and also roadmaps, which some SRE teams I've been on have and some don't. So I think roadmaps, I think they are important, and they're not good for every type of work, but for project work or long planned out work, the stuff that's basically not responsive, that's a good candidate to be put in a roadmap. It's a planning document. So this is an example, and it's not technical, but hopefully it can highlight how I think about roadmaps and how they can apply in your own workflow. So let's start here. So this is one about making dinner for your family. You'll notice the user-centric goal is to feed the family cheaply and quickly on a weeknight. So this isn't a wedding party. It's just the immediate family. It's not like the whole kids' soccer team or anything like that. And then, it's just your family members. Those are the only stakeholders. And the goal is you're going to make some tacos. That's the project. And that's why it's high priority. We got to get that family fed. And then a lower priority project is to make a wonderful dessert, but it's a weeknight, so it's just, you want to do it cheaply. And it's defrosting and serving a cheesecake that you bought at the grocery store. You can see there's the project, the stakeholders, the user-centric goal. That's where you're really thinking about what is the impact? What is the product I'm delivering? Here it's a cheap, hopefully good family dinner. And then the deliverables, which are quite tactical. And then deliverable status. You'll see that on the making tacos one, within that, we definitely want to make tacos. We definitely want to feed the family. But if we don't have a side, that doesn't mean the dinner should fail and no dinner happens. There are some stretch goals in there that we could have refried beans and a homemade salsa. But if it doesn't happen, that shouldn't prevent the product from being delivered. We still want to eat. Okay, so again, user-centric goals. They're about scope. Scope is so important in a roadmap. The deliverables are more technical and focused on tactical implementation. Also, when you're considering a roadmap, a lot of people do them on the year, or half year, or quarter. But I encourage you to consider 6-week intervals to start. This gives you enough time to get something substantial done, whether it's a whole project or a big milestone in a single project. And it's also a short enough time where if it turns out you've maybe sunk some costs into something that's like unimportant or you realize it's not going to be impactful, you can pivot and not have lost too much effort or time. Also at the beginning, we're like pretty bad at estimating. So by keeping it short, yeah, that just allows you to gut check yourself a little sooner. Okay, so here is how I would break out a big project. And maybe one of these like sub-projects would be in one of the 6-week intervals I just spoke about. Probably not all 3. Remember, your project isn't like transition to a new CI service in this case. There's like smaller, more tangible things. Like maybe first you run a new CI pilot, and you're gonna select one team for the one other engineering team to try this new CI pilot, and you're gonna get feedback from that. Maybe this engineering team is someone like you've just had good rapport with, and they have a lot of you guys have goodwill with each other. And then once you understand and have gotten feedback from that pilot, you can move on to, okay, we wanna spread this to make it generally available. I don't know what those technical milestones are there, partly because I haven't talked to that first pilot engineering team. But the goal is basically we want to transition all non-legacy applications with owners to new CI. And then I do want to talk about this last project here, this like getting rid of the old CI system. You'll notice that the user-centric goal is not decommission the old CI. It's reduce the risk to the engineering org. And it's important that that's the user-centric goal because it teaches you about the scope. Like the goal isn't like, okay, just get rid of our old infrastructure, our old software infrastructure. The goal is like, you're gonna have to do that gross work of finding all those services that don't have owners, they're like legacy stuff, and you're gonna have to either decommission those or transition them to the new CI system. You know, it's like, it's a different sort of ask than just like decommission old CI. Okay, and then I just wanna recap a little bit or get specific about how to use a roadmap. So the first thing is there's strict start and stop dates. It's time-based, whether you work on a quarter or on the 6-week interval. What you don't get done, you don't get done. And the point of that is because after 6 weeks, after that quarter, it's time to reflect. And honestly, if you got 100% of your high priority projects done, that is wonderful. If you got 100% of your high and low priority projects done, you probably weren't ambitious enough. So it's okay to not have finished the roadmap. It gives you time to reflect and move away from sunk costs. So just also tactically, how do you use the roadmap? You update it. A roadmap does not replace like sprint planning or your weekly or bi-weekly meetings, but it should be referenced in those weekly meetings. So the team lead shares a screen, whether that's if you have a product manager, a TPM, it might be the technical lead on it, whomever. They're gonna share their screen and you're gonna go line by line, deliverable by deliverable, and get a status update. And then you'll know it's on track, it's delayed, it's at risk, or you make the call that you're just not gonna do one of those deliverables. And that's good because by the end of your roadmap period, by the end of the quarter or 6 weeks, like it shouldn't be a surprise that some of the stuff hasn't gotten done. You've been talking about it the whole quarter. Oh, also one thing I didn't say is the second to last line here. At the beginning, we're pretty optimistic and think all the high priority projects can get done. Be realistic and be humble, and sometimes like other stuff comes up, and as a team, decide that that is no longer a high priority project. Not everything can be a P0 project, because you'll eventually make decisions about what you're gonna work on or not. And instead of just like pretending we can all get it done, just talk about it up front. All right, and one last note, the roadmap is an internal tool. It's not, don't just like email the roadmap out to your boss's boss and be like, this is the status. Because communication, it's not just about like giving people information, it's about helping people understand what you're trying to say. So like instead, like write a biweekly email. And you'll know the statuses because you'll be referencing your roadmap as you write that email, but package the message nicely. Don't just email out the roadmap. All right, 5, follow up with your users regularly. This circles back to that first point. Okay, just because you researched how your users work during the planning phase, which was maybe months ago, that does not mean their needs and pain points have stayed the same while you develop the product or endpoint or feature or infrastructure. To actually create something of quality that is usable, keep communication open with your users. Start that process up again. And sometimes I would get insecure about, am I taking too much time for my colleagues by doing these like 30-minute user interviews? And the answer is like, just no, you're not. Like people want to talk about when they're having trouble and they want to talk about it with someone who can help fix that problem. Like you're doing a service. Like it's great that you ask them what their problems are. So don't be shy about that. Explain up front what you're doing and then like build those relationships. Okay, so now like get started. So I want to touch on this. Like, so maybe you're like, Jen, wow, great talk. We're definitely going to add product management into our team. We've got tons of money in the hiring budget. But like pause for a second, please. So while I've been like a platform engineering and SRE TPM and product manager, not all organizations have that. And it's always tough to be the first. So for you, this might be an experiment for your team, like incorporating a formal product manager on the team. But it's not for whoever that person you hire. It's like the next step in their career. So really have thought about like, can you support a product manager in this part of the engineering organization? Will that product manager, they might be the only one, how are they going to get mentorship? As their manager, like you want to make sure that they still have connection to product managers or in other parts of the organization, And also, like, maybe you just like don't need to hire anyone or don't need to commit to that full-time role yet because there are people on your team who have that product management potential. And they want to start flexing that muscle, seeing if they're interested in it, even while keeping their SRE title and possibly later transitioning over to a different title. So this is some stuff I think about when I would interview myself or interview others for product manager roles in SRE or like platform engineering. So this person is probably an individual contributor and pretty senior. They should be technical for sure. And they don't necessarily need to have been an SRE, but they should understand software systems, scalability, and be willing to learn. They should probably have been a software engineer at some point in their career, again, but maybe not too. I've seen people without that experience just thrive. Maybe they, being a technical product or program manager, that's not just understanding technically like what's going to be built or architecting. That's a different job. It's also about the soft skills. So that's a must. This person must be like a pretty good leader, even if they're a little more junior, like have those leadership qualities, have those communication skills, have excellent soft skills. Remember, this is the person who's going to go out and partly represent your team to your users and colleagues. They're going to have to negotiate priorities with them, understand their pain points and translate them into things that y'all can actually build. So yeah, pay attention to this kind of stuff. All right, it's recap time. So here are the 5 things I spoke about. Things you can bring back to your own organization. Whether you have a product manager or want to hire one, or if you're just thinking on your team as the manager or like you want to introduce some of these processes. So prioritize user relationships. Know those people and talk to them. When you talk to them, ask non-leading questions. And then when you're ready to build, consider doing a prototyping sprint. It's time boxed and you'll learn a lot from it. When you're gonna write your roadmap, add user-centric goals. It's gonna help with scope. And then follow up with your users and start the cycle all over again. All right, thank you. I'm not on Twitter, so this is how you can get a hold of me.
Well, thank you very much. We have a good bit of time for questions, so if anyone's got a question, please put up your hand. Remembering always that questions are in the form of questions, not comments. Coming down to the back.
Thank you, that talk was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Just wondering, what sort of a size of team do you think an SRE team might be at before a product manager starts to get involved or should be involved?
Yeah, so I think product management concepts can start at any size SRE team. But I think like, it's usually at a decent sized organization because they can afford to hire that, that role that isn't going to be contributing to the code base. I don't know, when I've worked on, I usually am on teams as a product manager that are between like one team of like 6 or 7 to maybe I'm the product manager for multiple teams of about like 20. So that has worked for me. There has to be enough users to make hiring the role worthwhile. It's, you know, not necessarily good for a 2-person SRE team. But once you get a little bigger than that and the engineering org gets to, you know, 40 people you're supporting, it's good to start thinking about it.
Hi, great talk.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, in a global team with stuff going around the clock, is it okay to have a person do that role, or could a couple of people do that roles? Or if it's just one person, how do you manage a team in, for example, 3 different regions with those overlapping time spans?
Yeah. So the question, yeah, about a global team. I've worked on, at my previous company and at my current company, we're global and time zones are a mess. I do think that one person should play the role of product manager, like that final role of synthesizing everything and helping the team understand what the priorities of users are. When it comes to interviewing though, like that part of like user interviews, like divide and conquer based on what's convenient with your time zone. When it comes to doing the roadmap, all y'all gotta share the burden and have a weird time to meet because everyone needs to get on that same page. Luckily, road mapping only happens, you know, every 6 weeks, every quarter. So you all can share that burden as it, you know, kind of rotates around the globe, what time zone's convenient. Yeah, so I think there does need to be one voice one product voice for your team, but user interviews, like if everyone can get comfortable doing that and sharing that information back to the team, like do what's convenient for the time zone.
Thanks so much for the talk. It was really nice to see something both inspiring and also concrete about what to do. Cool. So here's my quandary. I'm someone who knows that product management is really important, and I've seen some things like this, and it looks like I have a roadmap for stuff to do. I just kind of don't want to do it. And I bet I'm not the only person in the room. It just seems like this. So it's not that I don't think it's that important. I just am not sure how to bring myself to do it because you have to talk to people. You have to be organized. Yeah. You have to structure all of this. You have to make decisions about things that are pretty ambiguous, about predicting a future, about what people want. It's just, so do you have advice for those of us who tend towards the engineering side, who know this is important, but just kind of can't stomach it or can't bring ourselves to do it that often? Yeah,
so I totally get you. So even though I'm okay like public speaking and stuff like that, sometimes I get shy, or there are parts of the engineering org that I'll be talking to where I'm like, I don't actually understand what they work on. So I get like kind of nervous to speak to them. So that sometimes holds me back in a different way, or maybe similar way to what you're talking about. And so when I think of doing the product work that needs to be part of this cycle, I talk about it in the weekly planning meetings as tasks that need to get done, especially for like a team who doesn't want to do it. Like that way we can hold ourselves accountable. You know, if this week, you know, if I'm an SRE and I'm doing some of the product work and I'm committed to interviewing 2 people, and then it comes to next week and like those JIRA cards are still in the to-do column, we can talk about it as a team, and it helps you get held accountable, and also like people can help them too. Like maybe 2 of you will go and do it instead of just the one because you're having like a little trouble. So I think like, yeah, creating community for you to be held accountable and also say like, my blocker is that I don't know how to do this. Like that's okay. And then the good news about the user interviews are like, you can just try your best, and then if you realize you didn't get useful information, you can just shoot a little Slack or email and ask a little more. Like the people you're interviewing have a lot of, they're just excited someone's asking them what's going on. So I found that you have a lot of leeway to just try your best even if you don't do it perfectly. Like, I mean, I got into this, like I had to be taught it after I messed up really publicly at my company. So like, you know, a product designer taught me. And so, yeah, I don't know. Don't be so precious about it. I guess that's my advice. Yeah.
Any more questions? Oh, one more here.
What advice or what priority or in what order would you implement product owner, SRE, or DevOps, or that in an organization that has none of it?
Okay, so what order would I implement those roles?
Yes, are those concepts,
Yeah.
is it a chicken and egg thing, or is there chronological, or is it all together, or how would you go about it?
You know, I think it depends on the organization. I don't know if I have a strong opinion about that, but I think someone who can start just getting the low-hanging fruit done, like the tactical low-hanging fruit done. So probably someone who can, an SRE or an engineer who can like start implementing what they think are the best practices is probably the best good first hire, because there's going to be some really obvious things to fix and they can make an impact right away. And as that team starts to grow, then I think it's good to think about that process, which means someone like a technical program manager or a product manager. But in the beginning, yeah, just someone who can be hands-on and is a little senior and can be a self-starter, that's probably the best bet. Yeah, I'm sorry it wasn't more concrete, yeah.
Hi. I was wondering if you had any quick comments on the role of a product designer in an SRE organization versus product manager, and how those could work together, or one versus the other, and how they fit together.
Yeah, so I've worked with product designers before when I worked on like platform engineering and SRE products, and it's like really useful. So the product manager is kind of pointing out like there is a problem that needs to be solved, like the what that needs to be solved and like why it's a problem for the users. And then you can offload a lot of those user interviews to the product designer then, those user experience interviews. And then they can come together and, with the product manager and make recommendations there. Yeah, so I think they work in tandem and have a lot of overlap in their function. I think a mistake some people make with product designers is thinking it's just aesthetic what they work on. But it's actually like, working with a product designer I think of them as like the experts in keeping a user in the flow of what you want them to do. Like that they don't fall off track or don't want to find a workaround. So like, yeah, don't think of a product designer as just like someone who can make stuff pretty or someone who does branding. They're really someone who can keep that user on track. So yeah, that's how I think of it.
Cool. Any more questions? Anyone? Nope. Question over here.
Hello. I have a question about weekly meetings.
Yeah.
How do you think, is there any sense of performing them if SRE team and members of SRE team has each own small project that not they have no a matching between them, and very often they come and work in their notebooks, and just when they say, David, okay, what do you doing in this week? They say something and back to a notebook.
Yeah.
Is there any sense of these meetings?
Yeah, so yeah, I think I understood the question, and feel free to add more. So the in a weekly planning meeting for an SRE team, maybe everything was on fire that week, and so the status update is none of the projects made any movement, and that we need to move one out of our roadmap. But I think the first thing is, if your team is really not used to road mapping, that's okay. Just introduce the project, the idea of projects. Maybe say okay, this next quarter, we're gonna try and spend 25% of our time on one big project. That way the team isn't balancing 5 medium-sized projects, but just say, okay, we're transitioning from just being totally responsive and reactive to we wanna make a big bet, so we're gonna put 25% of our time, and we're all gonna work towards this one goal. I think that can be a way to help transition the team to planning a little bit more long term, is just pick one project to start with. Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? I don't see any more hands.
Cool.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you guys so much.